Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning. I think this is 11:11. Welcome. So good to see you all. And some of you actually took my hint and you put on smiley faces. That's helpful. I don't know if you're smiling or frowning throughout the morning as we're together here, so I bought some of those. We're welcome to have those and use them. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, it's amazing to see you all. It is so good. I don't need to wear this. Hey, I have a beard. And some of you might remember I shaved it at one point. There we go. That's good. Okay, good. First of all, it is really great to see all of you all up here, in here together. I think there's about 35 or 40 of us here this morning. It's good to have you all online as well. I know we've shuffled things around because now we're going live for the first time in 13 months, I think it is. That's pretty. If you want to clap, you can clap. I think they can hear it. So, and you can clap at home. But I'm just so glad that I hope you found the link to tune in this morning, because we've had to change up a few things. But we're going to figure this out just like we did when we had to shift before. So it's really good to be back here. And aren't we all sort of just continuing to learn stuff as we're making our way through this? So as you're online there and as you're here present, I want to take a moment just to invite you to register. You don't need to register your attendance. You all do online. You need to register your attendance. But since you registered to be here, we've already got your attendance. And if you didn't show up, you're already registered as well. So, so I'm going to count you. Anyway, the other thing is while I'm talking up here, take a moment to look online, and you'll find the offering button there online. And you all on your phones, you can go to the link. I think there's a link. There was a link up here. It may be back up here in a minute, but you can find it online at the church website, FUMCFW. You can go right there to shelbygiving.com, and we appreciate your support that way. That's the way we're gonna do some things for right now. I appreciate y'all trying to keep safely distanced as best you can. I see some of you aren't all that safely distanced, but that's okay. I'm going to trust that you're okay with that as well. We tend to be a little more laid back here, but I appreciate you all wearing your masks. We're going to keep that pretty much a strict policy for now, CDC as well as the church policy, so we appreciate that. But I especially want to just thank you all for being patient with as we're trying to figure this whole process out. I know when some of you came in, we're not in the round right now. For those of you who are online, you don't really see that. And you see the band is reduced, so we've had to make some adjustments for being in person. But we're going to figure this out as we're going along. While you all are taking care of some of this stuff online and on your phones, I want to just mention very quickly that you can make reservations. We still had plenty of space here for more if you wanted to do that. And I know that's a little bit tricky system, but keep working at it. Some people told me that it wasn't working, and I found out that there's a blank that says children. You can't leave it blank if you don't have children. You have to put no children. So otherwise it rejects it. So that seemed to be the catch for a lot of people. Make sure that you do that. Reservations always start around noon o'clock, maybe a little bit after noon on the Sunday for the next Sunday. So that's what's going on. Hopefully you can be here with us next week. Finally, there's a retreat happening afterwards at 2 o'clock online, 2 to 4. Amy, and I forget her last name now, but she wrote the book Right Here, Right Now, Christian Mindfulness for Our Time, and it's a mindfulness retreat online for 2 hours. It's a great program. Lynn Deloney, one of our associate ministers, is hosting it, and then Amy is the one who's leading it, the author, so I invite you to participate in that if you'd like. What else, Brad? Am I missing anything else? I think we've got everything. Brad's going to start off with a great song to get us kind of in the spirit. You can kind of keep doing the offering or what else you want to do. You can sing along in a hum tone with your mouths closed. How's that? Brad, let's kick it off.
What's up, y'all? Hey, do they stand and not sing or sit and not sing? I'm going to invite y'all to stand and not sing along. I insist. Okay. It's good to have y'all back. I want to say that none of you have aged one bit since I saw you a year ago. Y'all all look amazing. All right, let's hit it. Y'all ready? Here we go. Yeah, clapping is totally awesome. We can clap. You may be watching from a safe distance, yeah. You may be so close you can taste the blood. You may have headed for higher ground. You may be drowning in the flood. No matter what you do, love will find you. All right. Verse 2 now. You may have lost what little faith you have. You may believe with all your heart. You may be pulling yourself together again. You may be falling apart. Here we go. No matter what you do, love will find you. One of you sees that love's a long-lost friend. One of you can recognize her face. One of you runs to her with open arms. One of you falls down in despair. You may see a million different gateways home. You may think there's only one way through. You may be waiting for the kingdom to come. You may believe it's in you. No matter what you do, love will find you. No matter what you do, love will find you. Love will find you. Love will find you. Rock and freaking roll. It's your turn now, isn't it, Jakey? Come on, my brother. Me and Jakey wear the same glasses wherever we go. Because we're cool.
Come, come. Whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again. Come, come.
Well done, brother. I think right now I'm supposed to invite you to do some sort of sign of peace. Am I right, Tom? Okay. But I imagine we can't be going and hugging everybody we don't know. I don't know. Okay, we're going to play a little song, and y'all just kind of go around and give each other a sign of peace and not spread any germs. Okay, ready to go. I forgot about these words. It's really good to see y'all, man. This is weird and exciting all at the same time. We're going to do another song that we're going to invite you not to sing along with us on. It's Out Beyond Ideas. I haven't tuned my guitar in a year, so it might be time to do that. I don't know if y'all knew this, but during the pandemic, our drummer and also his wife singer, Todd Franks and Krista Russell, moved to Colorado. Yeah, but since we were video, he just kept on playing drums for us. He could do that from anywhere. So they left, I don't know, that's been months ago. Yeah. And then I called up my friend John Mosig back here, so we now have a new drummer for 1111. Everybody say hi to John. He's a good-looking dude. And y'all remember everybody else, I think. That's Elena Gunter on vocals. I just introduced the whole band. Justin Payne on the keys. It's like a... I did not mean to go there, but we're doing it now. Brad Thompson on singing, you know what? Woo! That's Mike Brown back there on the bass guitar. So, we intend to get the rest of the band up here in due time. But for now, we're trying to keep it kind of scaled down. So,
horns are super spreaders.
Yeah.
It's hard to play a horn and not blow air all over the place.
Okay, here we go. Out beyond ideas, wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field, I'll meet you there. Out beyond ideas, wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field, I'll meet you there. And the soul lies down in that grass. It's too full to talk about ideas and language, even the phrase each other. Well, it doesn't make any sense. Out beyond ideas, wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field, I'll meet you there. Out beyond ideas, wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field, I'll meet you there. And the soul lies down in that grass. Is too full to talk about ideas and language, even the phrase each other. Well, it doesn't make any sense. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right. There is a field, I'll meet you there. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There is a field, I'll meet you there.
Good morning. People talk back, Tom. It's not just a screen. It's amazing. I've spent the last 13 months looking at people in little rectangles, and so it is so amazing to see you here in person and to not do a prayer from the Bean or the Dallas Arboretum or wherever it was that I found myself where I realized I'd forgotten to do the prayer for the video that week. So it's good to be here in person. And I just want to say just a quick word of thanks, because during this past year, it has been hard for everyone. Most people don't realize everything that goes on to making a church service happen in person, but not everyone really realizes what it takes to turn an in-person community into an online community every single week. And if you went into Tom's office right now, it looks more like a TV studio than an office. And Brad back here has gone from singing live all the time to being this amazing video producer that's just amazing. Amazing. And so for Tom and Linda and the entire tech team behind the scenes, Brad and everyone, just a word of thanks for hanging in there and somehow making us all still feel like we have a community and we have a place to be in 13 months of great uncertainty. So let's tell them thank you one more time. It has been an incredibly uncertain time, but we live in a world and in a life that is very uncertain, a place and a time where there's more questions than there are answers, and a time where we need to kind of meet in a field sometimes and breathe deeply and not hear all about the wrong things that our people are doing or how another side is right. And so we come here to this space where we are together. And so together now, may we pray. O Holy One, in the silence and in the chaos, you are there. Sometimes we do not realize it, and sometimes we do not feel it, because we feel so many other things: grief, sadness, loneliness, uncertainty, joy, exhilaration, love, and peace. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, we are called to a center where we realize that the world does not just spin around us, but that we are a part of something bigger and greater. So in this time together, whether in person or together with us online, wherever we find ourselves today, we are grateful that we are reminded once again that although none of us know the inner workings of one another, we are not alone, for we have one another to walk the journey, to ask the questions to speak our fears, and to share our joy. So thank you for a community such as this, for bringing us to a time such as this. And now may we be the peace and love for all those within this world as we find our way together. In the name of the one in whom we live and move and have our being, we pray. Amen.
Thank you, DeAndrea.
Rain
this temple will not stand. Fire blocking them to higher ground. Flood waters rising and we're Canaan bound. We've been traveling over rocky ground, rocky ground. We've been traveling over rocky ground, rocky ground. 10 to block what they were straight. Call for our service come Judgment Day. Before we cross that river wide, the blood on our hands will come back on us twice. Rise up, shepherd, rise up. Your flock is rolled far from the hills. Stars are fading, the sky is still. Sun's in the heavens, a new day is rising.
You use your muscle and your mind and you pray your best. Not your best is good enough, the Lord will do the rest. You raise your children and you teach them to walk straight and sure. You pray that hard times come no more. You try to sleep, you toss and turn, the bottom's dropping out. Where you once had faith, now there's only doubt. You pray for guidance, only silence now meets your prayers. Morning breaks, you awake, but no one's there. We've traveling over rocky ground, rocky ground. 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 We've traveling over rocky ground, rocky ground.
Listen, everyone. I know DeAndre already stole my thunder here. I was gonna thank everyone for all the stuff that they've been doing so far in this process. I mean, it's been amazing how we adjusted to this. Preachers were not trained on how to do acting on camera, how to be present on camera. We were trained to be present with people and connect with people, which is kind of the core of our theology, in fact. But now we had to get used to sort of speaking to a screen, and what was worse was we had to get used to, wait a minute, Brad, what was worse is that we had to get used to looking at ourselves in the screen, which is really strange. But I wanted to say just a real special thank you because Brad not only has done a great job and the band a great job with the music and keeping things interesting, which is also a big part of how we do things here, is that he's developed this skill and such. I mean, he really rose to the challenge, right? And he's got, 80 videos now? Something like 80 videos. You can go to the YouTube channel. You can go to the 1111 Facebook page and find some links there. But you need to check those out, too. And we might even start using them down the line as specials. So, but just another word of appreciation. He did a great job. And the other thing to thank, too, is I know that Graham Skipper, who was out in California when all of this started, and my daughter-in-law's brother, who'd done film work and such, and so he stepped in to start doing our pre-recorded editing and did a fantastic job with that. They're now down in Austin, and I'm hoping he's watching, but if not, let's just give him a hand anyway. And those of you at home, round of applause for Graham Skipper. Such a talented guy, and we're hoping to to use him more often. I don't know if you all watched the video last week. Whenever I said the title, Dr. Frankenstein, it's not resuscitation, resurrection is participation, and then the thunder would come on, right? Graham's whole specialty is in horror films. That's what he's produced, independent horror films. So he didn't ask for that, but there it is. So it's great to be here this morning and have you all again. Just thinking back on a whole year on when we were last together, when we were last able to hug during the greeting time, when we were last able to shake hands, see face to face, in person, in this room. That was over 13 months. It was almost 14 months ago when we did that. And then we went to Wesley Hall, and we went to doing a live stream for maybe 2 weeks. I don't know if Sharm, maybe it was 2, maybe it was 3. But after the third one, we decided we're going pre-recorded. And so we did pre-recording for the last 12 or so months. And so this is interesting, and it's all new, right? It's like we're learning how to do this all over again, although this, being together, feels natural. But it also, for me now, it feels natural to know that you all are out there as well watching, because that's been our reality for the last 13 months. And we literally have another crowd of folks watching from, I think, even Amman, Jordan. I have a friend and one of her friends, Kathy, who watches out there in Amman, Jordan, and in D.C. and all over the place. So we want to continue to be reaching out and connecting with those folks as well. So we're going to figure out how to do this really well. That's the goal. We're not sure yet exactly what that looks like, but we're going to figure this out. So this morning, I'm going to move into something that feels right for the next few weeks, and that is to think about who we are, why we are. Sort of rethink, when Linda and I started doing some of these interviews and stuff that we were doing early on, we talked about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic selves. And already now we're reading in the news, we're already seeing in op-eds and such, who are we going to be? What's our post-pandemic self look like? Our pre-pandemic self sort of entered into this crisis, and immediately we were thrown off our horses. At least I know a lot of us were. The challenges that we face, not simply just the challenges and the fear and the anxiety around this pandemic illness, but also the losses we were experiencing, some of us firsthand, and then also the losses of job, just the losses of our way of life and parents. I see some of y'all with kids here, and I know you at home. What a new reality that's been, right? So we've had to do a lot of changing and transformation in this process. But now the question is, who do we become? Who are we as we come back into this new reality? Because this is a new reality. Even post-pandemic, we'll be dealing with the psychological effects, not just the economic effects, not just the political effects, and not just the religious effects too, because church is different already, folks. But it's also the psychological effects. I was listening to the psychiatrist professor over at Southwestern University Med School in Dallas the other day, and he was talking how people don't realize how much PTSD is really a part of who we are now. We just aren't really processing that reality. So we're going to still be kind of putting things together, and in a sense, that seemed like an important time for us to think about who we are here as part of 1111. And I'm actually going to kind of explore that with you in a lot of detail over the coming weeks and next couple of months, even asking you to respond to some things online or in the mail as we kind of think about who we are and where we're headed. So be looking out for that thing. But first of all, I want to say, the thing that Linda and I were remembering as we were talking back, we were remembering how during that first couple of weeks or so, our dog got sick, Bruiser, and we had used the thermometer to check his temperature, right? And you know where you have to check a temperature on a dog. And so we had checked his temperature, but later that evening, Linda started feeling sick. And I said, she said, "Can you take my temperature?" And I said, "Well, I have to, you know where it's been." So immediately, I hit the road and I went looking for thermometers, and you know what happened. There wasn't a thermometer to be found anywhere in the city. I mean, I went to 5 or 6 different places looking for thermometers, and nobody had thermometers. And then Linda reminded me that my brother-in-law is a doctor. So I found my brother-in-law, and I went to their house, and they had several thermometers, and turned out she wasn't sick. But it was just that recognition, that realization. Well, come on, tell me you weren't feeling sick half the time in the first few weeks, right? You weren't taking your temperature all the time. I mean, we realized that there was just this anxiety and this rush on supplies of all sorts, and we found ourselves kind of in this panic, scared, and reactionary state. And even still, I think we've had to deal with that. We've had to deal with that through politics. We have to deal with that as we've come to recognize our place in Black Lives Matter and our place in racism, a reckoning that probably we might not have come to, in fact, if we had not been in this place of sort of stillness and observation and attentiveness where we weren't before. So we've been confronted with a lot of things and a lot of change. But still the question is, who are we and why are we exactly here? So I've entitled this series, it 1111 in 5.5 movements. And you know it has to be a half, right? Because that's who we are. We're not quite complete. In fact, some would say we're not complete at all. But there's this openness that's part of this whole process. And I got thinking about what are 5 kind of core movements. Practices, we often call them here in 1111, because what we do here in worship is really what we do as practice, right? It's really part of our daily who we are in the rest of our lifetime, in the rest of the day, the rest of our moments, week to week and day to day. So the first movement that I want to talk about is what we just did, our welcome. I want to talk about welcoming and how we are a welcoming community. If anything, one of our hallmarks has been sort of our inclusiveness, but not simply just our inclusiveness in terms of what we vouch for, what we fight for, what we aspire to in terms of sort of a progressive agenda in so many different ways. Inclusiveness in terms of the people we disagree with. We want them here. The people that we find difficult to be around, we want to be present. We want to be we want to be a place where everyone comes and where we don't ask questions for answers, but we ask questions for better questions. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm saying? We'll get more to that next week as we talk about the question, but for now, I want to think about the words, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, doesn't matter. We're not a caravan. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. And the cool thing about that, of course, is you know where that comes from, right? That comes from Jalaluddin Rumi, the 13th century mystic, Sufist mystic, out of the Islamic tradition. I'm not sure how many of you read the Quran. The Quran. My lips are getting. By the way, we have these for sale in the back. Just a moment, just a break there. And if you're visiting with us for the first time or online, make sure we know that you're there because we want to get you one. But the Quran has so many amazing things that overlap with so many of the other ideas of religious traditions all around the world, including this idea of welcome and inclusiveness. And the idea of welcome is an open invitation. It's an absolute sort of non-judgmental, open invitation to be present with others. So much so that in the Old Testament, of course, even a stranger coming along was treated as a high guest, and a feast was placed, before them. So we have this idea of come, whoever you are. But I want you to think about for just a minute, which one are you? I mean, sometimes we're all of them, but which one do you think you are? Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving? I came across this short little story that really, to me, sort of highlights who I think a lot of us are most of the time, especially in this space. It was a Zen teacher by the name of Basho. He was a Zen teacher and haiku poet, well known, and a student came to study with him. So he came to his door, and he was knocking on his door one afternoon, and Basho came to the door, and he saw the young man. He said, "Can I help you?" And the young man looked at him and says, "I am looking for the great teacher, Basho." And then Basho looked at him and says, "Well, isn't that a coincidence? I've been looking for him for 30 years myself." Right? That's kind of who I think we are in this idea of wandering, worshiper, lover of leaving. We acknowledge the mystery of who we are. We acknowledge the imperfection of who we are, but we also acknowledge the great gift. Which one are you? Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving? Kind of look at that lover of leaving and the one who breaks their vows as kind of a negative thing, right? So you know the word wanderer. The word wanderer has a root, which I love to study etymological studies, right? The word studies. And so the word wanderer has this idea of Well, we kind of think of it in two ways. Negatively, kind of as just ambling for no purpose, kind of just roaming around aimlessly. But the other one is more of sauntering, more of sort of being present to the moment, more in the way of the Lord of the Rings. And now I forgot the author's name, Lord of the Rings. Someone shout. Thank you, Tolkien. Yes, Tolkien, who said, not all who wander are lost, right? We find ourselves caught up in the moments when we're paying attention and we become part of the story that we're in. We're not all lost. In fact, when I was driving through New Mexico on my way to Albuquerque, I passed this wonderful sign north of town, and it's out in the middle of the desert, And the sign is just sitting there among some cacti and a telephone pole. And it says, land for sale. If this was yours, you'd be home. And I thought, yes, of course you would. What a great statement. That's almost like a Zen koan, right? It's just where we find ourselves sometimes. Is that what it was meant when Jesus said, you look here, you look there for the kingdom. Let me see some signs of it. And I'm telling you, it's already in your midst. We find ourselves wandering with a kind of sauntering. I want to just share a little a favorite writing of mine. One of my favorite authors, Henry David Thoreau. I know some of you love Thoreau. He had a little book called Walking. He printed back in the late 1800s. But I love how he said it. He opens it up by saying, I wish to speak for nature, for absolute freedom and wildness as contrasted with the freedom and culture that's merely civil. To regard a man or woman as inhabitant or as a part and parcel of nature rather than simply a member of society. In other words, something of the larger picture. I wish to make an extreme statement. If so, I may make an emphatic one, for there are enough champions of civilization, the minister, the school committee, and every one of you can take care of that. And I've met with one or two persons in the course of my life who understood the art of walking, that is, taking walks, who had a genius for sauntering, which I love how he explains it, because he says, which word is beautifully derived from idle people who roved about the country in the Middle Ages asking charity under pretense of going to La Sainte-Terre, to the Holy Land, till the children would exclaim, there goes a Sainte-Terre, or quite literally, a Holy Lander. Isn't that beautiful? What a lovely idea. What would it mean if we wandered instead of aimlessly, but if we wandered with a kind of sauntering, with a Holy Lander perspective, that every encounter and every moment that we encountered was part of the inextricable interconnectedness that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke about, that we are all a part of, or that science reminds us that we are all a part of. This idea of sauntering, is that who you are? Worshiper. I always, I thought of worshiping as this idea traditionally as sort of the dualistic notion of the one we sort of hold in high honor. We worship God on high. We come to sort of worship the other. There's a whole other understanding of worship if you go back to its earliest roots. In Old England, they would use the word your lordship or your worship as a tone of honor. But if you go back a little further, you find out that what worship actually comes from the word the two roots were and ship actually mean were is to find worth, to find worth or give worth, and the second ship is to create or to make, to sort of give it grounding, which is in the idea then when we come to worship, what are we coming to give honor? Is it to something other, or is it something that happens between us? Worshiper. Lover of leaving is my favorite. We're always leaving. Not just literally that some of you don't come back to church, but we're always leaving. Some of you come and go. But we're always leaving. When we think about breaking our vows, how many times do we literally break our vows? Do we break away from our deepest sense of who we are? Do we deny? Do we leave behind our best sense of who we truly are? We almost always have this sense deep within us, and yet we find ways to cover it, to cloud it, to personify it, and other ways to distract ourselves, to get into patterns that lead us away from our deepest, truest self. We're all wanderers and we're all worshipers, but also I think we are all lovers of leaving. I want to read a real quick scripture passage and tell you a story before I close up. This is one of my favorite passages. And it comes from the Gospel of Thomas. Now, some of you know the Gospel of Thomas. It was one of the earliest Gospels. It's actually considered, we don't have any actual sources now, but we see it in the other texts of the Gospels that we do have, something that's shared between them, but not necessarily shared because of each other. So we find this Gospel of Thomas, and we've come up with so many different sayings. And it's a beautiful writing if you look it up online. This is the 22nd saying, or logio, in the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus saw some infants who were nursing with their mother, and Jesus looked at his disciples. He said, "These infants nursing are like those who enter the kingdom." He said, "They enter when you make," who enter the king. And then he said to them, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inside as the outside, and the outside as the inside, and the upper as the lower, when you make the male and the female into a single one, and not so that they are separate, but that they are one, then you begin to enter into the kingdom." I just thought this was interesting. When you make the inside the outside and the outside the inside, any Stranger Things fans in here? Okay. yeah, flip it upside down. But there's so much truth to that, isn't there? There's so much truth to that need for us to flip things in order to see them more clearly, to challenge even our own perceptions in ways that we take away the dualities, that we break down. And then, of course, as Jesus says in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 9, or in Mark in chapter 9, where the disciples are arguing which one of them is famous, the most famous, and Jesus brings a child and says, "When you see this one as me and see me as God, when you see this one as God, you are entering into the kingdom, for you have to be like a child to get into the kingdom." It takes a complete reorienting to understand back what to get back to who our authentic self is. Who are we at our core? So the Rabbi Baal Shem Tov, the 17th century founder of the Hasidic faith. The Rabbi Baal Shem Tov was traveling around with his disciples through what's now present-day Warsaw and Prague in that region. And it was the 17th century, of course. The Christians dominated the region. Jews were often persecuted, a lot of anti-Semitism going on. And one afternoon, the rabbi looked at his disciples and gave them all different responsibilities for when he died. They would be taking care of these, and one of them was the storyteller. And he looked at him and said, "You're going to be telling the stories of everything we did." And the disciple said, "Well, how long will I be doing that?" And the rabbi said, "Well, you'll do it as long as you need to, but you'll know when you can stop." And that was all he was left with. And so eventually the rabbi did die, and the disciple went all about the region telling these stories. He told them for 5-10 years. He traveled about, he got pay, simple pay, he got lodging, sometimes food, but he was always gratitude. People loved hearing the stories of the Baal Shem Tov. And then he started noticing fewer and fewer people were asking. He began wondering, maybe they're just getting tired of the stories, the same old stories. He started worrying that maybe he wasn't telling them right. And after some time, he didn't have any work. He was scrounging around trying to make ends meet. When one day he heard rumor of a very wealthy man who lived outside the village, outside of Warsaw, a small little village. But the man loved stories. So he made his way to that village. It took him a couple of days. When he got to the village, somebody directed him to this beautiful, large, sort of palatial ranch kind of house. It was just beautiful on the land. And he made his way up to the place. When the wealthy man opened the door, he saw the disciple, and he said, "You used to be with the Rebbe." And he said, "Yes." He said, "You know the stories." And he said, "Yes." He said, "Then come in." And he offered to pay him and to keep him through the weekend after the Sabbath. And so he stayed, and every night as he would gather to eat, the wealthy man would say, "Tell me a story," and then he couldn't think of one. And then he would say, "Surely you know something," but he couldn't think. "Well, stay, you'll think of something." He said, "Just stay." Another day passed. Couldn't think of a single story. I know what that's like. He totally went blank. And then on the third day, he felt guilty, and he decided, there's no reason for me to stay. I'm just wasting your resources and your time. And he made his way out the door. And just as he was walking out the door, isn't that always how it happens? Just as he was leaving, it came to him. He said, "I remember a story." And the man said, "Come back in and sit at the table." And so they sat down. He said, "So tell me quickly before you lose it." And the disciple said, "I remember one strange occasion, and I have no idea why, but I remember when the rabbi told us that we had to go to a certain village inside Prague, a certain ghetto area where the Jews lived, a Jewish ghetto. And he said, and all of us tried to dissuade the rabbi because we know it was threatening. I mean, the Christians there would abuse us, would persecute us, would harass us. There was no reason to go there, but the rabbi insisted. And what was worse is that we knew this time of the year was a very special celebration, when the bishop and all of those around the bishop and his archbishops and such, they would all come and gather, and they would make a great parade of Christians through the village streets, and so the Jews would hide. So when we got there, he said, as he was telling the wealthy man, we got there, we hid. We hid in a small hovel in the ghetto area. But here came the parade, and as the parade was coming, the rabbi looked at me. We were all hiding. The rabbi said, I want you to go out there, and I want you to tell the bishop, I want you to tell them that I'd like to see him. I said I wouldn't do it. He insisted, and I said I couldn't do it. And he sent one of the others out there. He sent a younger man who went out there, and I was surprised that they didn't beat him up as he made his way through the crowd. But we watched through the cracks of the window as this other disciple made his way to the bishop and stopped the bishop right as he was about to give a speech. And all he looked up to say from the crowd was he looked up at the bishop and said, the Baal Shem Tov needs to see you now. And the bishop tried to ignore him, but we saw that our friend continued to persist until finally the bishop looked up to the heavens and said, the Lord wishes to speak to me in private, and then left. As he let someone else sort of take over, he followed that disciple back to our little hiding. We all backed away and hid in the corners as this bishop came through with a couple of his other guards and such. And as they made their way back to the rabbi, they went to a private room, and they were there for almost an hour. And we were fearful for his life. But after that hour had passed, the bishop came out without a word to us and the two following him, and they went out the door. And then the rabbi looked at me and the other disciples and said, we can go now. That's all I remember, he said. And as he looked over at the wealthy man who was sitting at the table, the wealthy man was actually smiling and then went into tears. And he bent his head down. And the disciple said, I'm sorry, I wish I could have told you a better story. I've wasted so much of your time. And then the wealthy man looked up and he said, no, of course you don't understand, but I was that bishop. And what the rabbi told me when I went to meet with him was he said, you have got to stop what you were doing. And he looked at the disciple and he says, because you see, I was bar mitzvahed. But under pressure, I confessed to Christianity, became a Christian. I didn't want to live under the same fear as the Jews, and so I left myself, and I became something other. And the rabbi told me that when I would give this up, there would be a time that I would hear my story. And when I'd hear my story, I would know that I've been made whole. That's what I think we do here. We come from all our different places, some from broken church relationships, some from difficult experiences, some from feelings of rejection, and some from feelings of questions, and some with just a sense of wandering. But we all come, no matter who we are, no matter who we love, no matter how we are, no matter where we've been, we all come. And in the process, I think what we offer is a chance to recognize how each of us is famous. How each of us, when we find our place and hear our story, we're made whole. I'm going to invite Jakey up here. Where'd Jakey go? Jakey's going to read a closing benediction for us. Before he does that, I'm going to give you a challenge next week. We're going to think about questions. And what I want you to do is I want you to think of a theological question that just comes to mind, or a question that comes to mind about some difficult thing in your life or some difficult person. And then I want you to resist the temptation to go to an answer, but to ask a question of that question. And if you can't think of where to go after that, just keep asking questions. But don't ever come up with an answer. We'll have some fun with that next week. Jakey, thanks for closing us up.
Famous. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence. which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to birds watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous, briefly, to the cheek. The idea you carry in your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous only to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing the street, sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in a way a pulley is famous or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, there's 4 other people I want to recognize. We are very, very, very fortunate to have Parker Matheny return to us to run cameras and do all the video, so thank you for coming back to us. We're very, very lucky and grateful that Xavier Munoz has come back to run sound for us again. We're very, very fortunate to have this new fella named Ed, and I don't know Ed's last name. All right, thank you, sir. It's good to have Ed with us now. And finally, it's good to have Austin Patton, who stayed with us during the whole pandemic. I can't imagine being the head of AV Thank y'all again so much, and let's do one more song together, all right? Here we go.
These are
Fantastique. Do I get to dismiss everybody for the first time in a year?
You're up there.
Are you? That was it. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Oh, you do it.
Bless you.